Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SOA webinar on the University Earned Credit Program. I'm Shreyla Rose, Director of Communications for the Society of Actuaries. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available after the event on SOA.org. If you'd like to ask a question of the presenters during the presentation and during the Q&A portion, you can enter those into the Q&A box down below. Our presenters will be giving a half-an-hour presentation, and then we'll move to your questions for the balance of the webinar. Afterwards, you will receive a short feedback survey to your registration email. Please do take a minute to complete the survey, and we thank you in advance for doing so. Your presenters today are Jennifer Gillespie, SOA President-elect, and Gina Long, SOA Director of Professionalism and University Relations. We will later be joined by SOA's Managing Director of Education, Ken Guthrie, and SOA Senior Education Staff Fellow, Stuart Klugman, for the Q&A session. Thank you to each of our volunteer and staff presenters today. Jennifer?
Thank you, Sheree. So besides being president-elect, it might be more relevant today to know that I chaired the UEC task force. And this task force was charged by the SOA board with coming up with the details and requirements for this University Earned Credit program. And the point is to help top students earn credit through select preliminary exams through courses at our approved CAE partners. And that's the core program. And we're also going to talk about an extension of that program that will be focused on universities that serve diverse populations. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. Next slide, please. So why go to CAEs and why do it now? These are excellent questions. And in fact, those of us on the task force were asking the same questions all the time. For the last several years, the various SOA boards, the iterations that happen with elections every year, have worked on research and listening to many employers and candidates and members and schools and trying to get the lay of the land. And all of that input led them to make the long-term growth strategy and the case for change. And some of that says we need to be able to do this to compete. And we're competing in two ways. We're trying to get the best and brightest students to want to be actuaries. And we don't want to let them slip off our path to move over to data science. So we want to make it more efficient for them. So if those top students can get some credit for the coursework they're already doing, then hopefully they'll continue on our path versus turning away to the dark side for data science. No, it's not really dark. It's just we want to have them be actuaries. And then we know that we're competing internationally with programs by the Australian Institute of Actuaries, the Canadian Institute of Actuaries, and the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries who offer similar programs. And several of them have been doing it for years and years. And so especially in Asia, that's a very common way to get credit. And we want the SOA to be positioned to get those same top students that are at the Asian universities. And also that we have the opportunity to attract additional Asian universities because there's something else they can offer their students with this program. So hopefully more will decide to do the work to meet the standards and apply to be a CAE university. Also, if you think about it, I know myself doing self-study for actuarial exams did not learn material as well as if I'd had an actuary who was faculty teaching it to me. So for our candidates at those universities, that's how they're going to learn. And then those schools do a lot more to incorporate EQ and AQ, which we call emotional quotient and adaptability quotient. And that's judgment and your ability to adapt and flex, communicate, all those sorts of things. And that's lots of what we hear from employers about what they need actuaries to be, especially as the work that actuaries do continues to change and be more about using models and AI and all of those things. The role of the actuary is to use the judgment and to come up with how we need to fine tune and all of that. So it's easier to incorporate some of that in a whole curriculum during an actuarial program than it is in the syllabus that the SOA has, although we're going to try and do it there too. And there's a whole learning community devoted to your actuarial career. So they're really well supported in these environments. Next slide, please. So there's really two key components here. Our Centers of Actuarial Excellence Evaluation Committee will continue to exist, and they look at the full actuarial program. And there are 8 requirements that they need to meet. Some of them are a little more academic, and some of them are more around how they're supporting their students. But it looks at things like if they have opportunity to have internships, and if they have advisors for their program that are coming from industry, and maybe they have speakers, and they have a really strong actuarial club where these students get to be leaders and get to have a lot of additional, coursework. Like they might work on R in their actuarial club, so they have an opportunity to work on additional skills, stuff like that. And then we're going to take, besides that CAE, we're going to add an additional level of supervision, and that is for the specific courses for which the university wants to be able to offer their candidates the opportunity to get credit. And we're going to be looking carefully at those. Next slide, please. So why the CAE schools? So as I said, they're really built around a community supporting these actuaries. They're connected to industry. These are things that we require for them to be a CAE. The faculty there has a little opportunity to put the latest versions of materials or tools into practice. They're actually learning from actuaries. And then of course they have the ability to work AQ and EQ skills in. They maybe have group projects and presentations in some of their courses. It may or may not be in the exact courses that we are going to give credit for, but it's in their whole required curriculum to go for the major. So it's throughout the program. And I'm going to turn it over to Gina Long to discuss more of the details at the university.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. So let's look at this from the university's perspective to see what they'll need to do to comply with the program if they're interested in providing UEC for their students. So to be eligible, universities will need to have been a CAE for at least 2 years. This means they'll need to have been through a CAE evaluation and site visit to confirm the 8 criteria are met, and then through 1 additional annual review after that. So we will have looked at them thoroughly twice before they're eligible to be UEC. They'll need to apply for a minimum number of preliminary exams. Now we have decided that we will be including FM and SRM as 2 exams that are eligible for UEC, and possibly 1 or 2 others that will be decided in the next month or so. We'll know more after the June board meeting. And application materials will be available for these universities in July of this year. We will not be including exam P, as we've noted here, for a couple of reasons. It's typically taught outside the actuarial program at universities. And as I'm sure many of you know, it's a screening tool for employers and candidates entering the profession. So for now, exam P will not be included in UEC. The universities will need to have the learning objective coverage for the exams at 85% for UEC courses. Now, that's higher than the 80% requirement for CAE currently. And no more than 2 courses will be needed for each exam. So we don't want one exam's course topic spread over 3 or more courses, but there will be some exams that need two semesters of courses for coverage. And as Jennifer mentioned, the university will also need to show up front to us that they are including education for their students on adaptability and emotional intelligence. Next slide, please. So if a CAE believes it meets those initial requirements, they would submit an application for UEC, and at that time, they would recommend a member of their faculty who is an SOA member to be an accreditation actuary. So that would be a new role at each CAE. The application would then be looked at by the CAE evaluation committee to confirm the CAE status has been in place for 2 years, and then over to the new oversight committee for UEC to determine their eligibility, as we talked about on the previous slide. And then if that is confirmed, we would recruit an SOA member volunteer to serve as an external examiner. Next slide, please. So the external examiner's job will be a very detailed one. They'll be digging into all aspects of the courses that are proposed for UEC. So they'll be looking to confirm the syllabus coverage is at that 85% or better. They will confirm that there is a high percentage, a very high percentage of grading points for each course that are based on proctored examinations. They'll be reviewing the final exam for the course early on, likely before the term starts, to make sure that it covers the exam topics as needed. The final exam for the course will need to be cumulative and worth a minimum percentage of grading points for the course. We'll also be looking at exam security and testing security. So when they are taking those proctored examinations and the final exam, that security measures in place, such as are the appropriate number of proctors there for the number of students taking the exam, spacing between students, making sure that there's a new exam each term. The external examiner will also look at whether the pass mark sits in the right place. So that we're talking the UEC pass mark. So this is a higher pass mark than it will be to just pass the course. They'll also be looking at the grading results and making sure that line for those higher up getting the UEC credit lies just in the right place. So that's a lot for the external examiner. So we're going to make sure that they undergo training. That'll come through the Oversight Committee and through SOA education volunteers and staff to make sure they're prepared to properly evaluate the UEC courses. And next slide. So looking at it, let's see what it looks like for students, a lot less complicated on their end. So they do need to be enrolled in the degree program at one of the CAE universities that has been approved. The task force and the board really felt it was important that the students who are receiving this UEC credit have the benefit of the full actuarial program at these universities and all the attributes that Jennifer was mentioning earlier, and not just coming to the school for a one-off course. Students would need to pass the UEC courses with the required UEC pass mark, which again is higher than the regular pass mark for the course. And it would be, sometimes, as I mentioned, more than one course would be needed for UEC credit for a particular exam. So in those cases, students would need to attain the UEC pass mark in each course, and they would also have to complete both courses within a 2-year window. And then finally, the student would apply and pay a fee to receive the exam credit. They'd need to do that within 2 years of the completion of the final course they needed for that exam. And so we thought the 2 years would give them a little bit of extra flexibility with regard to paying that fee. And also students would be eligible for any discounts that are currently given for exams for students. And next slide. So just look at how this lays out time-wise. As you know, the official announcement on UEC went out a little over a week ago. We're holding the member and candidate webinars this week. As noted here on May 27th on Thursday, we have 2 candidate webinars happening at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. Central. Later tonight, we're doing another member webinar. So several of those, and I think there may be one additional member webinar planned for Friday. There'll be an announcement going on about that. So then in late 2021 and early 2022, interested CAE universities will go through the UEC application process. We are currently collecting expressions of interest from those universities, and formal applications will be due in October, on October 15th. And then through late 2021 and early 2022, we'll be doing the review of the applications, conducting site visits, making decisions on which CAE are approved, assigning external examiners, et cetera. So this would mean that the first UEC courses would be given as early as the third quarter of, or at least starting in the third quarter of 2022. And candidates who might have completed a 1-semester course, say in the third and fourth quarter of 2022 for maybe FM, they might be able to get their exam credit in the early part of 2023 would be the earliest. And I'm going to kick it back to Jennifer. She has a couple more slides.
All right, so as I mentioned at the top of the show here, the board also approved an extension of university earned credit for universities that serve a high proportion of underrepresented populations for our actuarial profession. So these might be historically Black colleges and universities, they may be Hispanic serving, they might be serving Native American populations. And rather than just sort of double down on the same stream of folks that we are getting today, we wanted to do something different and go to them meet them where they are. And some of that's literally geographic because of where our CAEs are versus where some of the more intense populations that are diverse live. And some of it is just simply helping them find out about it, meeting them in the sense that they may not have heard of the actuarial profession. And this isn't, the one magic thing, but it's yet another thing that the Society of Actuaries can do to help make sure that the population of actuaries looks more like the population of the country. So for this extension, it will be for FM only. So they don't have to meet the CAE level criteria and they can't get any other courses, but they can get started. And presumably their university will also have enough coursework maybe to help jumpstart them for exam P as well, so that they could present to an employer with 2 exams. And the difference here in this extension is that the university doesn't have to meet the overall CAE level criteria, those 8 things that we talk about, but they do have to meet all of the exact same requirements for the actual courses for which they want to deliver credit. So they'll have an examination, actuary look at their course for FM, their syllabus, their exam, set the pass mark, all of that. That part will be exactly the same. So they'll be the same strong, prepared student as they would be at a CAE school. They just won't have all of the other CAE programs around them. But because these schools probably don't have actuaries on staff, they probably haven't necessarily been teaching this course, they might need more time to get up and running and more support from the Society of Actuaries. And that support can look like a number of different things. It might be advice, it might be support for marketing and outreach to students and to high school students in the area, maybe places that they serve. It could even be funding an actuary to teach this course because they probably don't have an actuary on staff. So it'll be a small group that we kind of pilot this with, and it'll probably be a different amount of support for each of those. But again, it's really important to know that any student that gets credit met the exact same testing requirement that any other CAE student would meet. And again, got more ramp up time, so it will be a year later that those courses can first be taught. And we're going to move into Q&A and really want to hear from all of you, but I'm going to jump in with some of the questions that we've been hearing and reading and everything along the way since we've made our announcement. And then we'll jump to more of the ones that you're welcome to submit. So first, a question about CAEs and who are they, and are they elitist universities? And I want to give you some of the facts about that. So today there are 33 CAE universities around the world, and only 5 are actually private. The rest receive public funding. They are not all large and they are not all small. There's a wide range in size of their actuarial programs. So they might graduate, we have one that graduates between like 10 and 15 actuarial students in each year. And some of them have very large actuarial programs and graduate more like 150 to 175 actuarial students each year. So a lot of variation in that. Some are in urban locations and some aren't. And a couple of those in our urban locations really do have more diverse student bodies, and that's great. So CAEs are not all diverse or all not diverse. There's a mix there too. And then one thing else about CAEs that I think is really important to respond to the question about why now is that, like when I was taking exams, there weren't really actuarial programs around the country. That just wasn't a really big thing. And in the time since, many have developed, and some of them have gotten very comprehensive and are our CAE schools. And so there's that next level, that's our universities and colleges with actuarial programs, our UCAP schools, and we identify those for folks as well. But so there's a lot more focus on educating actuaries in specific places, but we know that lots of our actuaries also receive their education in universities all over the country. And so we want to help people on both paths, right? Exams are still going to exist, so that person taking them at either didn't hear about it while they were in high school, so they didn't choose an actuarial program, or they want to go to some other school that doesn't have one, they can still take SOA exams and become an actuary whenever they learn about it. If you have somebody that went to a CAE and they didn't achieve that high pass mark, they can do some more self-study and take an SOA exam. So we haven't shut them down in any way. And then also part of our diversity is people that started in a different career and have switched to becoming an actuary, and they're still welcome in the profession, and SOA exams, of course, are a really important path for them as well. And grade inflation is a very real concern when talking about universities. Our task force talked about this, and we talked about it, frankly, with the CAE schools. You might have a situation where a professor, for whatever reason, doesn't get all the way through material in the course of a semester, and so they set their final exam based on what they got through. But that's not really acceptable in the world of university earned credit, because we need you to have covered and examined the students on the full syllabus. So we require that those exams be set before the course. So it's on the full syllabus. If you don't get through it, then the students are going to have to study on their own, or you won't have any successful students that semester, or whatever is going to happen. And it isn't enough to just pass the course, or maybe even in some places get an A in the course. That's not how we're going to set it. We're going to set it as a % of the points on that examination that we've actually looked at. So we really do want to, deal with the grade inflation, that we're setting a really high bar here. Questions about whether this is a money-making entity for the SOA. And while they will have to pay to get their credit, they'll pay whatever they would have paid to take an exam. So if they get like a student discount, or for our diverse students, if they get the support of that program, they'll pay that lower rate. And in some cases, their employers will probably be happy to pay it, because they don't have to, it's not a 50-50, you're gonna pass the exam. They know they already got the credit, so that it shows up right away. But the reality is we have a lot of expenses to support this program. So we have those examiners we talked about. The site visits for the CAE schools used to be every 5 years if they were CAE, but under this program, they're going to be every 3 years. So there'll be increased expenses due to that. So, we hope it'll cover its costs, but it's not really meant to be a money-making adventure. And then, will it be easier? That's an interesting question. So I don't think you have to know less stuff. If you're that top student and you worked really hard in the course and studied really hard for the final, and you get credit, you don't have the extra hurdle of now you have to go take an SOA exam. So it's more efficient. And if that makes it easier, then I guess it's easier. But we don't think that we're going to let people through who wouldn't have gotten through otherwise. So only that, like, those best prepared, solid students are going to get credit this way. You can't get credit just for getting through the class. That's not sufficient. All right. So I think we're going to take more questions, and Sheree is going to facilitate that part of our discussion.
Thank you, Jennifer and Gina. And if we can have our other panelists come online. Hi, Stuart. Gina. And hi, Ken. Okay, so we've got lots of questions coming in. So I'm glad we had some time to really get to these. And so first question is, what data supports that top candidates are interested in pursuing a career in data science? What did the board and consider when thinking about data science and pursuit of that, and maybe them not pursuing the actual science profession?
I think there were some focus groups with candidates who stopped taking actuarial exams. So I think that's where some of the input came from. I think it's anecdotal. I think there've been some concerns from employers I don't know, those of you at the SOA, if you've got additional sources.
So, hi, this is Stuart. Thanks for all of you for attending. One of the other things we did was did focus group with university faculty to ask what they were seeing with their students. And all of them were indicating that data science, as compared to other fields from the past, has turned out to be a very attractive option. They heard things from their seniors, such as if I had known as a freshman that the data science was an option for me, I would have picked that. And so they're finding a lot of rivalry from those programs at their schools in a way that they hadn't seen before from alternative majors that might have been considered in the past.
And I'll just jump in with my comment at the top. I actually think it's great if actuaries know a lot about data science. So I don't mean to suggest that we shouldn't know about it. Also, we still want them to not pursue becoming an actuary.
Great, thank you. So in the past, programs like this have been considered by the SOA in the past. What's different about this program and this point in time?
So I think a couple of things that we covered, spread out through this presentation that I'll toss out there is that we have many, many more of our candidates are international, and we're competing with programs that are like this for those students. So especially across Asia, where they might choose to get educated through the Australian Institute or through the Institute and faculty, that's different. The fact that we have the close relationship with CAE schools didn't exist before. So that's been something that's been developing and building. There are more of them. We know more about them. They know more about us. We've had a chance to really look at quality of students that are coming out of those schools, how the amount of coverage of our syllabus they have on their courses. And so we know a lot more about what's going on there versus at some points in time when we've looked at this, we'd have actuaries going to like every university in the country, and there's no good way to, keep your tabs on what the quality level is when it's that spread out. So this gives us a focus where we can, feel that we're assured of high quality.
Thank you, Jennifer. A question from for the education team is for students who eventually are eligible for a UEC program that's been approved. Do they have to be actuarial science majors?
Not technically, no. Now the oversight committee that's being formed now will kind of nail down a lot of specifics. We're giving you some of the general larger scope rules today. But the oversight group will nail down the specifics. And currently the thought is that it will be anyone who is at a CAE school in the actuarial science program will likely be in an actuarial science degree. But that doesn't mean that necessarily there couldn't be students who are double majoring in something and aren't technically in the actuarial science degree, but are still involved in the actuarial program to the extent that they still have the capability of the advantage of all of those attributes that the program has to offer. That they will need to be a degree seeking student. Could be a master's student, could be an undergrad student, could even be part-time if they are degree seeking.
And really as a follow-up to that, for career changers and for students that are not at CAE eligible universities, how does this affect their accessibility to the career and to the actual science career and coursework? What are your thoughts on, and this is really for anybody. I know this has been a big point of discussion.
Yep, and I'll just jump in here because I didn't go to an actuarial program. I went to a small liberal arts school. So this would have been me. I didn't know about actuarial science until I was, in college. That's why our exams are so important, because it's still the way that folks who are in that situation will be able to get into the pathway. I think that the better job we do with our high school outreach, and that's just not like me or SOA staff or the board members, that's all of you as well, that everybody that's in the profession, how we do a good job of reaching out to our community where we live, or the high school that we attended, or the neighbor's kid, or wherever we get a chance to talk with somebody and tell them about the actuarial profession so that they know about it and can get started, even if they don't choose to do it at a center of actuarial excellence. It might influence the coursework that they take, and then the knowing about the exam so they can, sign up and take exams. And, having good prep materials from all the different vendors that offer them is another way that actuaries get supported.
Okay, thank you. And so another question that's been coming in, and seen a few of them along this lines. What impact does the University Earned Credit Program have on the travel time to ASA?
We think for these students that, are scoring the highest scoring students in the CAE school courses that are approved, it will make it a little more efficient for them. And that's one of the main goals is to try to keep those students in the profession and alleviate them having to additionally take the exam on top of having scored really high on a well-vetted course.
Some of that we'll have to wait and see, I think, until we have data.
Another question that I know you talked about earlier, as far as some of the questions that have come in, but we'll come at this from a little bit different angle. How will quality and equity be assured across different CAE universities and professors? So I know we've talked about exam grade, but this is there another? Does anybody else want to weigh in on this question?
Well, I think that's some of the training that we do of the examiners to make sure that they're all kind of looking for the same stuff. I don't think we can solve for making all university professors of equal quality. We all know who we thought was good and who we didn't think was as strong when we were in school ourselves. And some of them may be stronger in research and some are stronger in teaching, et cetera. But the expectations of what the candidates have covered, we're going to work really hard to train our examiners so that there's consistency there.
Okay. Do instructors, go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, and to add to that, it's not just the course content that will be closely scrutinized, but the examinations as well, to make sure that they're asking the tough questions that are at least as difficult as those on the SOA exam, and maybe more so given the ability to not always have to use multiple choice tests. And then also to be through the oversight committee and the external examiners to make sure the grading rubrics are in line with our expectation. And then ultimately, the SOA is the final arbiter of what mark is needed to earn an exemption.
So another specific question about students at the UEC, in a UEC program, if they're at an approved CAE and they say they don't attain a degree from the university, does that have any impact on the university earned credit that they earned or they qualified for while taking classes there?
I mean, if I assume that means that they started in the degree program at a CAE, took a UEC course, got credit, or was eligible for credit, and then didn't finish for some reason or moved on, they would still have that credit. They'd have 2 years to claim that credit.
So I think this relates to the earlier question about what kind of degree program you have to be in or what your association is. And as noted, we will have to write some specific rules on this. The main thing we're trying to avoid here is a person who spots a course at a school and just drops in to take that one course and try to get the credit for that exam without being committed to that university, to their programs. So not getting as it was mentioned, the full benefits of what the school has to offer. So the person that was just described wouldn't fit that category. They were there, they were part of the program, the intentions were good, the class was good, their performance was good, and the credit will persist.
So, and a question about the instructors for these courses, do the instructors teaching the courses need to be actuaries, an ASA or an FSA?
Many times they will be. We do require credentialed actuaries at our CAE schools, but many times they won't. So they'll be professors who are qualified to teach that course material.
And along those lines as well, and a lot of really great specific questions about how the program would be administered. And so can the proctoring actuary, I presume for the examination, be the same actuary who's teaching the course? How does that work? Who's proctoring exams, and how does that?
That is
Well,
not a rule that we have written yet. So that would be something that the oversight committee would need to decide. So it's yet to be determined.
hey, I'm scrolling through. Thanks to everybody. The questions keep coming in, so just so I'm trying to keep up with all of you. As far as what kind of anticipation, we know how many CAE schools we have. Do we have any, how many CAE schools, can apply? Do we think, do we have an anticipation of how many will apply? And I think what a lot of our audience, what they're looking at is they're trying to get an idea of how many students would really be impacted by these, the university earned credit options.
So I don't think we know yet. When Gina talked about the timeline, we're still in the window for sort of they're giving us an advance heads up that they're interested, which they don't actually have to do. So if it takes them longer to decide, they don't have to decide, they don't have to do the heads up. They can just apply. We have gotten a number of declarations of interest already. So we know that there's interest out there. We actually would be just as happy if all of them didn't apply the first year, because that's a lot of site visits and a lot of work to carry out. And it may be that some of them want to wait and see if it takes off before they apply, or they've got other stuff that they're trying to work through with their faculty, and this isn't the right year for them to tackle one more thing. And so maybe they apply a second year or third year. It's not a one-time only offer, but we think we're going to have a hefty number. I don't know if we'll get half. We just kind of have to wait and see that want to apply the first year. We'll see.
We're also hopeful that universities that aren't quite CAE right now, but are close, or who may be at CAE level but haven't applied for whatever reason, might see this as something that makes it more of interest to them, and work to become a CAE now and then apply for UESP in the future. So we do believe it will grow over time.
Well, that's a perfect segue to my next question. Is, for the universities and colleges with actuarial programs, why CAE, knowing that we have other, other actuarial science programs? So, talking about that aspiration, to CAE, can you talk a little bit about, why CAE? And I know we talked about that before, but help to understand the difference between those, those different types of programs, and what that does for the UCAPs.
So I know I've talked to a number of different schools that are UCAP schools that aspire to be CAEs, and they actually find our requirements for CAE to be, the fact that they're published, we can talk with them about it, to be really helpful, because a lot of times you might have an actuarial department or a math department that focuses on actuarial stuff in a university where they need to have some more support and financing from the university in order to, maybe it's hire another actuary to be on their staff. Maybe it's to give them a little bit lighter course load so they can meet the research requirements. Maybe it's something else, but typically those, because they require funding, are some of the barriers. And so if those schools have yet another thing to go to their dean and their president with and say, here's where we are, like, we're this far away, we just need funding or support for this one more thing, and we could be part of this too. Sometimes that can be really helpful for those programs when there's just that push that they needed in order to get the support.
Thank you, Jennifer. So we have a lot of questions about the diversity extension of the University Earned Credit Program. Everything from, how will universities with underrepresented students be identified. So from everything from an eligibility to, what types of additional support would be provided. I know that this program is under development, but is there anything additional that the team can share about this extension program?
So I guess I can start, and then I think Gina may want to enhance on my answer, but it's really new. So we're feeling our way here, but there are umbrella organizations to which many of these universities and colleges that really focus on diverse populations belong to. So we can get lists of what schools are out there. And as I said, we kind of may want to look at some geographies where we don't have a CAE near them. And so that there's really a barrier, a geographic barrier to folks having access to that may be another thing. We'd like to work with schools that want to work with us. So there's going to be some outreach to say, hey, are you interested? I mean, we're not going to force this on anybody. So, there's going to kind of probably be some back and forth. And maybe some of those schools are UCAP already, so that they're a little more ready to go than some of the schools that aren't even at that status. And Gina, I don't know if you've had a chance to think about more specifics that you can enhance my answer.
We have that our university team has started working with our diversity or our DE&I team here at the SOA on compiling some lists that we will later then kind of hone down and start with probably a handful of schools, but including, your historically Black colleges and universities or your Spanish serving institutions, Spanish speaking serving institutions. So there are a few scattered in the UCAP list, as Jennifer mentioned, that we would probably be looking to reach out to, but not stopping there, looking to go to some of the universities that aren't currently connected to us through that program, and potentially help them build an actuarial science program if they're interested, if they have students that are interested in or may be interested, helping them maybe with a little bit of marketing to see if the interest is there first. But it's going to take some development. It may take us helping support the hiring of an actuary to teach an FM course, something of that nature. So, as Jennifer mentioned, we want to step cautiously into that arena and make sure that we are, meeting their needs as well.
Thank you, Gina. Thank you, Jennifer. Getting some very specific questions about grading. So one of the questions is about, is the threshold grade required for credit decided after reviewing the exams or after reviewing the student grade distribution?
I was hoping Stuart wanted to answer.
Yeah, I was, and I was waiting for Ken to answer, but I'll go ahead and take my shot at it. So the expectations are that the exams will be crafted so that a person who meets the learning objectives for the exam and performs as well as those who pass the SOA exam on that subject will earn a score of a range, still to be set by the oversight committee. But we'll want every school who's doing this to create an exam that targets a preset pass mark, or I should say a waiver mark, not just to pass the course, but to get the exemption from the SOA. However, upon seeing the student results, it's possible in consultation with the external examiner and approval from the oversight committee, that mark could be bumped up 2 points or lowered a couple points. If there's something specific about the exam that maybe they underestimated what it would take to be successful on it. But definitely, as with all SOA exams, no quotas, no curves, no idea ahead of time how many should or will pass. Those who exceed the mark will get the credit, and those who don't will try again. And so kind of the same process that we use for our current exams. Committees have a really good idea of what a passing score should be. And then sometimes upon reviewing the candidate papers, a small adjustment is made to reflect their performance.
And I think that really goes to answering this question. Let's see if there's any more information that you can impart, is that do students only have to get a high score on the final exam, or do they have to have high scores on all interim exams and assignments during the coursework?
It's the latter. So it's one of the rules is we want the final exam to be cumulative, and we want it to contain a high share of the total points for the semester of the course, but the entire course worth of work will be factored into the score that's used to determine whether the credit's earned or not.
Okay. And also along those lines, we mentioned that the final exam for UEC courses will have to be approved by the SOA prior to the course starting. Will the UEC course professors then know the questions that will be on the final exam? Could they teach to those specific questions instead of the overall syllabus?
Well, I think, and I'll speak partly as a former professor myself, it's pretty much always the case that you know what's on your exam and you know what's important. And so, you would do this even if you're preparing students for an SOA exam to highlight what you think will be on it. But our expectation is we're dealing with professionals here who will take that duty seriously, and it's never to a professor's advantage to say, here's a question that will be on your test.
I'll just add that, we said there has to be the accreditation actuary at the college or university has to be an SOA member. So that means that, if they do something that's really inappropriate and unprofessional, I mean, we have professionalism ways to take them through a process and have discipline if necessary. So we don't think that's going to happen.
And also kind of along these lines of maybe getting back towards these new positions that have been created, with the actuary that's employed at the CAE, so this would be the AA, I believe, right? Have responsibility for designing the final exam or perhaps peer reviewing. Gina and Ken, could you talk a little bit more about those new roles and what their responsibilities are in general?
Sure. Again, this is new, and the oversight committee will be coming up with the job description for the accreditation actuary, for the external examiner, even more specifically than we've shared today. But that person wouldn't necessarily create every exam at the school. So the faculty who are teaching the courses will prepare the exams as they always have. It's just that they would then go under scrutiny by the external examiner. I would think that the accreditation actuary would be an excellent person to peer review and help hone the exam to the point where we are satisfied with it. But those requirements haven't been set yet.
Okay, I'm scanning questions. Thanks again, everybody. I still have a lot of questions coming in, so I want to make sure we've got plenty of time. So we'll try to get through as many of these as we possibly can. So back to the diversity extension of the UEC program. I think we've answered this question, but I just want to make sure. So, have the schools for a pilot program already been selected? It sounds like they have not, that we're not, at that point. We need to set up criteria and do outreach, but any insight into, sounds like people are really excited about this and have lots of questions about how we move forward.
So no, they have not been selected yet. We have started to put lists together, as we mentioned, from the lists of historically Black colleges, Hispanic-speaking institutions, our database of universities, and kind of seeing where things cross over and where we can make connections. But then it'll be a matter of probably starting with a handful and starting to reach out. And then, as Jennifer mentioned, they may not all be interested in working with us. So, it's not possible to come up with a list for you today, but some will likely be from the current UCAP lists that happen to be serving more diverse students, and some will be brand new to us.
And I'm assuming that if there are any of these schools who are out there listening and represented today, that they can contact the education department in order to, let us know what their interest is and what their questions are. I see Ken nodding his head yes. So if there's any of you out there, please do. You can either email us at cae@soa.org or just email us at membercoms@soa.org, and we'll certainly pass you through.
Sure, we'd love to hear of the interest.
So there's some questions about fees. For the UEC fee that students would pay for application, there's a couple of questions. One, do you anticipate that employers would pay that fee? They're also asking if why have the fee if they've paid for the coursework and the credits at the university? Does that not cover it? So any thoughts about answers to those particular questions about how the fee structure is handled?
So paying the university for their course doesn't help the SOA with all the expenses that the SOA has. So those two things are really quite separate. We have heard from other places that have programs like this that often employers will pay the fee. We don't know how that will happen in the US, but one of our task force members was like a hiring actuary who does a lot of that kind of work at her employer. And she thought that they would, because it's 100% that you're going to get the credit. So it's, in the scope of attracting somebody, it can be a recruiting tool for an employer to say that they're willing to do this. So there's no requirement that an employer cover it, but we suspect that it will happen frequently.
So on that line, we do have one piece of experience, is that we know it's not unusual for employers to pay the VEE fees for students who earn their VEE credit while in school, but then apply for it after they start work and the employer will pick it up. It's also the reason we've allowed for a lag in time between when the course is taken and when the fee has to be paid. So that would give the students an opportunity to at least ask their employer a year or two down the road to cover it for them.
Excellent, thank you. So let's just shift gears a little bit and go to this, the emotional intelligence quotient and the adaptability quotient. Why is the SOA focusing on EQ and AQ respectively when assessing university eligibility for UEC? Why not leave this up to the employers or leave it up to the universities?
So I think that we all need work on both of those. They're really important skills. So we can't wait till we're hired to start working on it. You need to work on it when you're at university. You need to work on it once you're employed. You need to work on it after you still have a credential. You need to keep working on it. So I think it's sort of like a yes and kind of answer.
I'll add a bit of detail there too. We conducted a very thorough job analysis in the fall of last year, and we asked people to, volunteers and various different employer representatives to look out ahead 5 years and talk about the demands on the profession in 5 years' time. And what came back very clearly was this need to make sure that we were training actuaries to become much better communicators. That's always been there, frankly, but also the ability to work better in teams, to deal with ambiguity better, to communicate that ambiguity more appropriately, those sorts of things. And that came clearly back in the job analysis, both up at the level of the common core, is what we're calling it, to ASA, and also more specialist level to between ASA and FSA. And then when we've talked to employers, so we've gone out and talked to employers about this program, but also about some other changes that we're not quite ready to announce. And the feedback there has been very, very clear on that question. Say, you really are missing a beat here without dealing with these sorts of skills. We'd like to see you do it as early in the pathway as possible and have it reinforced all the way through. So we're looking at how we incorporate that within the pathway to ASA at the moment. And then, of course, because we're introducing this program too, we need to make sure that the universities are being actively encouraged to really promote that well from an early stage as well. And this approach, the UEC approach, gives us some leverage to really get universities involved in this in a more comprehensive way than perhaps they are at this point. And I'll say that universities are probably better placed to deal with these sorts of those sorts of skills development, because you've got typically face-to-face classes, and you've got the opportunity to bring people together in groups. So it's a little easier in some respects, a little better in a university context than it would be all online. But yeah, there's a definite push, and you'll see fairly soon with some future announcements that we'll be introducing more of an orientation in that direction for the good of the profession long term in the next month to 2 months.
Excellent. Thank you, Ken. So shifting gears again, will the UEC, and this is getting into practical, the real practical questions, will the UEC only be available for preliminary exams? So is this, I know that we've identified some exams that they're going to be available. Can you talk a little bit more about additional decisions that are coming up in regard to that?
Sure. Currently, there are no plans to have UEC for anything beyond preliminary exams. So as I mentioned, so FM, SRM for sure, maybe 1 or 2 more that we will add from the preliminary group. We will not be doing exam PA through UEC. There's potential for growth, beyond the 2 to 3, 4 in the future, but we do want to start with a set smaller number and make sure we're running the program as rigorously as we'd like to.
Thank you, Gina. So what are students' options if they do not earn the required mark in a course and therefore do not attain the UEC at a university? What happens next?
So technically they are allowed to take the course again. I mean, we don't have any rules about that, but realistically, they take an exam, they study for it, they build on what they learned in the course, they do more self-study, and then they take a traditional actuarial exam.
Yeah, just like today.
Yeah, just to amplify what Jennifer said, most universities allow students to retake a course for the opportunity to earn a better grade in their system. We will allow the same. A student can repeat a course and use the mark they get on the repeat trial to apply for UEC credit.
Thanks, Stuart. So how will candidates indicate that they've earned UEC on resumes for internships and jobs if they've not formally applied for and received their credit from the SOA yet?
So I guess that's kind of up to them, but I can imagine they would say they've earned but not claimed credit for FM, for instance, they could say.
Similar to what they're doing now for VEE, as Stuart mentioned, some way to indicate that they have it, but they haven't claimed it yet.
And I would say at the end of the term, we will know based on our interactions with the universities, shortly after the end of the term, which students have earned the credit. So it'll be on record, and all we'd be waiting for to put it on the transcript is for them to do the paperwork and pay the fee within the 2-year time period. But we would have it on record, which would mean if an employer, say, looked at a resume and wasn't sure if the credit had been earned, there would be a mechanism for verifying that.
Thank you. So thinking down the line, the programs in place and candidates and students are utilizing it to its full potential. And what type of reporting do you expect from the SOA that will be able to communicate with members about the results and how people are doing, like we do with exam results and pass rates and things like that today? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think it'd be a very good thing. I mean, we're being very, very cautious about the way we're introducing this. So you know, a lot of the questions that came up earlier about, you know, why CAE, why no further? Well, that's because we know the CAEs really well. We also know they do a really proper job, and you know, they're comprehensive in terms of their education. And we know that we can depend on those, you know, those universities to do a very good job out of the box. So we're looking to you know, make sure that we can get the system running, you know, really well with partners that we know really well and can and developed a trusting relationship with. And so we want to be able to report that it's going well. We expect, and we'll obviously work very hard to make sure it does work well. But I think it is a good thing for us to report out on. And you know, because we're very cautious about this being a brand new program, somewhat controversial in terms of the way it's been discussed in the past, certainly. So yeah, we'll be. It'll take us a couple of years, I think, before we'll have all the data in place, because we'll need to see people not just go through the system, you know, in its current form, but also how they go beyond that and with other exams they sit directly with the SOA to make sure that they're making the kind of progress you'd expect. But we should be producing a report first for the board and then for the membership.
Excellent. Thank you, Ken. So, you know, going back to, you know, thinking about employers, by creating an alternative with the UEC, what do you anticipate, or what are the kind of conversations have you had with employers about what the difference is, or is there any difference between an ASA who has attained their ASA with a couple of UECs as opposed to, in comparison to an ASA who's attained their you know, accreditation through you know, the taking the examinations through the SOA. So, you know, this is a question that comes up very often. What are your thoughts about when this issue is brought up?
So I'll start. You guys can add on. You know, we don't know yet because it's not in existence, but we don't think it should impact anything negatively. So just like today, if an employer is going to look at a candidate who came through an actuarial program versus somebody who didn't, they're going to have to decide that it doesn't matter, or they think certain things. So yeah, it's something that's a little bit different about how, but we're doing everything to have a really high standard so that it shouldn't be a negative in any way like that. We have also actually had conversations like with the American Academy of Actuaries about the fact that we're doing this, and they were supportive of the, you know, strict way that we're implementing this. We've talked with the Casualty Actuarial Society, and we've talked with the IFOA, and then we've talked with the Australians, and we've talked with the Canadians. So, I mean, we have had a chance to get a little bit of feedback from those entities as well, that nobody thought that we were watering anything down. So I hope that employers won't find that to be the case either.
Any other thoughts? So I certainly have, you know, follow up to that. Is that to a certain extent, does participation in the UEC program have any effect on future actuaries' ability to sign actuarial opinions? That's one of the couple of questions that we've received.
If you earn your ASA, you'll still have your ASA. So no, I don't expect that it would. And like I said, we talked with the Academy. They didn't seem to have any issues with that in terms of qualification standards or anything. We're being strict, and those that get it this way really should have been the people that would have successfully passed the exam in any case.
And also, you know, starting to kind of along those lines, you know, how does the UEC program impact the value of credentials that were already earned? You know, this is new and it's different, and obviously people have a lot of questions about that, but all of you talk about, you know, how you see it impacting the value of the SOA credentials down the line.
So our task force was full of people who are credential holders today. Everybody cares about that. We want well-qualified people being joining our crew of actuaries, right? We don't want the value of the credential that we're proud of and working with and everything to be watered down. I think as we described this, you heard that we're keeping it pretty narrow, we're keeping it pretty strict, we're leaving some exams in place so employers can see, oh, they really can pass a P or something in the format of the Society of Actuaries exam. We don't expect there to be a flood of people that get credentials this way. And certainly we'll be watching, like if it feels like we're letting folks through that employers end up being disappointed about, that would be a really big problem and we'd need to make changes. But we really think we're going the other way, that like we've kept it really strict to make sure that we aren't watering anything down for existing credential holders or for employers who are hiring, that they'll be just as happy with the people that they hire who have some of their exams with credit this way.
And just might add, actually, while we want to be cautious at the beginning, we do want to expand the program to the point where there'd be a meaningful number of actuaries coming through the system. If in the end it's just a trickle year after year, it's a lot of effort that hasn't made much of a change. So we're starting out, as Jennifer said many times, cautious, working with universities we know and trust. Scaling it up will be a challenge when that time comes, but we want it to be accepted and to be successful and be an alternative for other candidates down the road.
Thank you. And, I know we've answered this question in our FAQs, and I certainly direct anyone who's on the webinar, if you haven't had a chance to do a deep dive into the FAQs that are available on SOA.org, I encourage you to do so. But, one of the questions is have other organizations tried this, and, and how has it been successful? Are we doing something new here?
No, we're more like the last one to the party. This is the way actuaries have been getting credit around the world for many years. The IFOA, the Australian Institute, now the Canadians, now almost 8-9 years now, the CIA has been running a program of this type. So really the US is one of the last areas to move in this direction at all.
It's also worth noting that the CAS also give credit for the CIA's accreditation program. So for Canadian credits earned through the system that the CIA oversees, the CAS have been given credit there for it's probably about 8 years or so now. So I think we're literally the last of the actuarial educators globally to be involved in that.
And I'm just going to put out there, because we're throwing around a lot of acronyms, but Institute and Faculty of Actuaries, IFOA, is the British system. So obviously that's used in many, many countries around the world.
Thank you. So where can they find more information? Where's it, people are asking, it's like, where is a list of the UCAP schools? Where can I find a list of the universities that have actuarial offerings? Where is that publicly available? So can you tell us a little bit more about all of the resources and where they can find all of that on SOA.org?
Sure. So on SOA.org in the education vertical, so there's an education tab. If you go into there and then over to the right are some university options. There's a CAE page. There's the UCAP page, or the Universities and Colleges with Actuarial Programs page. That's where the big list is. That includes the CAEs. So you can look through those there. Through the CAE page, you can get to the UEC information that we've now put out. So we have an overview out there and the FAQs that Sheree mentioned. And we'll be adding to that as the committee is formed, and in July we will be providing the application materials. So you'll see how the application looks. It'll all be public.
And I believe you can map all of these things as well. So if you want to see where these schools are, you can look at that too.
Yeah, from the SOA Explorer map, you can just look at UCAP schools. You can just look at CAE schools. So.
That is very true. It will find you wherever you are and show you all of the everything from UCAP and VEE to CAEs around you. So we're getting a lot of questions that I know are covered by the FAQ. I'm gonna throw a couple of them out there, but we'll continue to remind folks a lot of the questions that we're getting are very specifically addressed. But this one isn't, and I thought this was interesting. What if I want to, as an actuary, what if I want to be teaching courses at a university? How do I explore that opportunity? I can't think of a better group of folks to ask what the how would somebody go about doing that? Because we do certainly love having actuaries teaching at these universities.
Yeah, I would encourage you to reach out to your local universities if they have actuarial programs or if they're maybe trying to develop something. Many universities, CAEs included, have credentialed actuaries who come in and teach usually some of the higher level insurance related courses and things like that on an adjunct basis. So if anyone is interested in that, you could start with the CAE list or the UCAP list and look at the universities around you that have programs. And reach out.
And
And
some are doing remote, especially now, everybody's remote, but many times their actuary, it doesn't have to be limited to ones that are near you.
So I'll give a plug for another opportunity. Well, I'll ask Gina to give it. Another way you can connect with the local university's actuarial program is to be a university support actuary. So Gina, can you finish
Sure.
my sentence?
Yeah, so we have a program, it's a mentoring program. So where we link credentialed actuaries with a university, and we like to have them in the local area so you can actually go over and maybe do a presentation. We provide training, we provide PowerPoint presentations for you to use, and we would just connect you with the faculty. And it's a great way to go and share your experience as an actuary, share your pathway through the exams, how tips that you had studying when you went through with students who are looking to start in the career, how to land that first internship or that first job. So if anyone's interested in that, for now, for ease of use, I would just say let's write to the CAE at SOA.org box. Or Sheree, I think you have a box set up for this webinar that they could respond to, and we can route you the right direction.
Yes, that's member comms. So it's membercomms at SOA.org. So a couple more really specific questions, and questions that I think are going to come up at our upcoming candidate webcast. This is for members, and we will be meeting with candidates as well. And so interesting question. And so if they don't pass the course the first time, unlike with SOA exams, you can study and retake the exam. What happens? Do you take the whole course over again? Do you start studying for for the SOA exam? What do you do? What happens in that case?
Yeah, I think we answered that. You would,
Okay.
if you wanted to, you could take the course over again. Most universities will allow you to take the course over again for a higher grade. So if you took the course over again, you would need to take the complete course over again and all the exams related to it and attain the UEC mark in order to get the credit. But yes, you could take it over.
And
Okay.
you can also take the SOA exam. So you don't have
to take the SOA exam.
Yes and yes to your proposed solutions, Sheree.
Okay. Well, as I am starting to ask questions that have already been answered, I want to go ahead and say we don't see a lot of new questions coming in. So some opportunities for everybody. You've heard the email addresses. You have the ability to send us any additional questions that you have after the webinar. We will be obsessing and downloading all of the questions that were sent into us and the answers, and we will be updating that FAQ that we mentioned in order to capture all of your feedback. So we are really appreciative of everyone being on the webcast today and providing us with all of your information and your questions and your ideas. It is all recorded and gives us an opportunity to upgrade our communications as well, because I'm sure there are others who weren't able to attend the webinar who have questions the same as you. I want to thank Jennifer and Gina for your leadership and your expertise today in presenting and answering questions. A very special thank you to Ken and to Stuart joining us for the Q&A as well. And of course, to all of you who attended and submitted your questions. At this time, I'm going to conclude the webcast. If you have any additional questions or comments, please send them to us at that membercoms@soa.org address. For a recording of this webcast and for detailed program descriptions and FAQs, you can visit SOA.org. Keep an eye on your SOA News Weekly email. We'll certainly let you know when those links are live via that member communication. And again, thanks to everyone, and please enjoy your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.